portion under our old business. We've been talking about landlord-tenant stuff at this Courts and Corrections Committee for a long time now, and we finally have some really good data that came out of the Lehigh Valley Justice Institute. So we have Joe Welsh here tonight, along with I think it was Nicole Levy, no, Victoria Wrigley. I don't know why I knew it was a Y at the end. Who is also here from the Lehigh Valley Justice Institute. Um, who they have a really good presentation for us just in regards to some really interesting data that they pulled from AOPC about the last a decade of landlord-tenant dispute information. So I'm not sure, Dave or Jeff, how we can turn the reins over to Joe Welsh. Um, and I believe he has a couple other folks that are here from the LV Justice Institute, but I want to start with Joe so that he can help us bring some of the other people into maybe as panelists even, so they can give their presentation.
Um, the reason we started this study was because of the interest that the commissioners had expressed in these landlord-tenant issues, and obviously the eviction crisis that we know is going on, certainly in places all over the country, not just Lehigh County. With me tonight is Victoria Wrigley, who is our data scientist, who did all the number crunching and whatever on this, and Nicole Levy, who is our researcher and administrative coordinator, who has a degree in anthropology and will be speaking a little bit about the societal effects behind the numbers that we're going to present to you. We're providing the data as part of what we consider to be our role as a trusted community partner, both to community organizations and to government agencies. We'd like you to have the best data possible to base public policy decisions. What we did was we looked at 10 years worth of landlord-tenant cases in Lehigh County. And interestingly, as we were finishing this study, and this goes to a question that Commissioner Brace asked at the last commissioners meeting, we found out that there was a statewide study which was just released last week, which looked at a smaller data set. It was 3 years of data, and they also did comparisons to zip codes. We broke ours down by census tracts, which we correlated with magisterial district justice geography. But in any event, what we were very happy to see was that our overall results pretty much mirrored what the statewide study did. So once again, this is an issue for Lehigh County to work on, but it is also not by any means a uniquely Lehigh County issue. Basically, the three findings that we had were, as I mentioned at the last commissioners meeting, tenants win 0.9% of all cases, which means if you had 1,000 people in a room, 9 of the tenants would win. It kind of suggests that something might be a little imbalanced. But what's more interesting is when we looked at tenants who were represented by attorneys, their chances of winning went up 1,200%. And finally, perhaps the most significant finding that we found was that the racial makeup of a magisterial district justice district has a stronger relationship to the outcome, in particular to tenant losses, than even the per capita income of that district. That suggests that there may be some implicit biases at work. So what we are providing as recommendations are, one, that we provide tenants with resource information and some form of legal representation. That two, we institute a settlement mediation program. And three, that we look at implicit bias awareness programs. And it's not just because of landlord-tenant cases. We're starting to see these disparities in other data that we're looking at in other aspects, specifically in the criminal justice system. So that's in a nutshell our report. We also that's the graph. Very good. We also think that we should be looking at things like eviction expungement and know your rights sessions for tenants and even landlords. And we've had some discussions with community partners about that, but those are beyond what the data that we're presenting tonight suggests. So for tonight, we're just sticking with what the data tells us. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Victoria Wiggley to tell us how she crunched all the numbers.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you so much for having me tonight and for your interest in this report. As Joe said, our organization is founded on delivering reliable, data-driven results to serve the community. As access to affordable and consistent housing is inextricably linked to criminal justice, this project dovetails perfectly with our mission. In this project, we focused on the outcomes of cases filed by landlords against their tenants to see how the court system was working for tenants in these situations. We obtained the data from the AOPC. It contains roughly 54,000 cases comprising the last 10 years of landlord-tenant cases filed in Lehigh County's Magisterial District Court. As Joe mentioned, and as you can see in Figure 1, tenants won a meager 0.9% of cases. Only about 17% of cases did not make it to trial, and there were solutions outside of court. Nearly 83% of cases did go to trial, and of those cases that went to trial, landlords won 98.9% of them. In Figure 2A, you can see that adding lawyers to the mix helped moderate case outcomes somewhat. When a tenant had access to a lawyer, their chances of winning increased from 0.8% to 10.4%, which was an increase of 1,200%, sorry. When landlords had access to lawyers, the percentage of cases withdrawn increased as well. So this suggests that having lawyers may help level the playing field somewhat. The finding we're most intrigued by is what you can see in Figures 4A, B, and C on the right. Essentially, we wanted to measure the strength of the relationships between certain demographic variables and the percentage of cases lost by tenants in each district. We were interested in examining income and race and seeing how they were related to the proportion of cases that tenants would lose in a district. And what we found is, as you can see by the graphs on the right, is that a district's non-white proportion, or the proportion of non-white citizens in that district, is more closely related. The relationship between the loss percentages that tenants can experience is tighter. Those two bottom graphs there, the data points are tighter, they're more linear, rather than the one with per capita income. To elaborate on this further, we did a multiple linear regression analysis to look at the effects of each variable, per capita income and non-white and Hispanic, on the loss percent. And what we found is that when you control for income, race is still a significant factor. But if you control for race, income is not a significant factor. And what this means is that if you wanted to make an educated guess about what percentage of cases are tenants going to lose in this district, you want to make a prediction, and you only have two statistics. You only have the district's non-white proportion, and you have the district's per capita income. The non-white proportion will help you make a more accurate prediction on the percentage of cases tenants will lose than per capita income. Not only that, but you don't even need per capita income to make your educated guess. Your educated guess will be just as good without per capita income being involved. This suggests some deep biases and injustices within our system, which my colleague Nicole will talk about next.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Vicki, and thank you so much, commissioners, for your attention to this problem today. I will be giving a brief background from an anthropological perspective. The Lehigh Valley is a microcosm of the United States in the sense that it is representative of the racial and socioeconomic diversity that is reflective of our nation. As has been presented before you, the inequity in our landlord-tenant outcomes in Lehigh County are both stark and unsettling. Families won a disproportionate amount of only 0.9% of these cases. While it may be more comfortable for some to view these issues through rose-colored glasses, it's essential that these problems be addressed as like a ripple effect in a pond. What affects one individual then affects a family, then a neighborhood, then a city, and so on. But what does all this mean from a socioeconomic lens? Eviction contributes to the destabilization of communities in many forms, and the social and economic implications of these findings have effects on us all. From a societal standpoint, evictions can be devastating to Lehigh County residents. Evictions lead to familial housing instability as well as exacerbate homelessness. And as it's so often households with children who are facing evictions, housing instability can be devastating to a child's developing mind and mental and emotional maturation. Eviction leads to depression, development of mental health issues, and contribute towards behavioral and educational concerns. I ask us all, what type of world outlook is cultivated in our children when their homes and their lives are uprooted like this? Economically, high rates of evictions negatively impact communities in a plethora of ways. First, it contributes to tax increases. High rates of eviction contribute to the exacerbation of homelessness and housing instability. This inevitably creates further demand for social relief programs, which increases taxes as well as depletes city and county funds that are needed for other issues. Additionally, high rates of evictions contribute to housing blight in our communities. Constant turnover of tenants caused by eviction inevitably leads to wear and tear on houses and leads to property and building deterioration. As these properties lose economic support, neighborhoods fall into disrepair, negatively affecting other neighborhoods around them, resulting in urban decay. All of these act as contributing factors, lowering property values and belaboring local economies. What do these quantified calculations mean in real life situations for definitively real men, women, and children? These findings reflect systemic and intrinsic inequities in our system. They pinpoint undeniable racial disparities that continue to persist in our policies and institutions. Ultimately, they negatively affect scores of people and families after years of housing and social inequities. I implore you all to continue to work for policies that promote a fair and just society that we all equally wish to cultivate. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And we're available for any questions that you may have, and certainly are available in the future for any further questions.
Thank you so much. Having the data shows some of the things that we already kind of were knew about. You know, you kind of know that tenants aren't necessarily winning the cases. There are three big things that really stood out for me. I think, first of all, from a perspective of someone that is looking to save court docket space, seeing where settlements can occur, withdrawals can occur, and how having an attorney on both sides really helps with that is big for me, because that's where we're going to get the cost savings that we can use to pay for other programs, be it mediation or be it something like that. The other thing that really stood out was the 1,200% increase in success for tenants that are represented. And, you know, I saw data from Philly that seemed to indicate it was, you know, maybe 60% higher or 80% higher or something like that. That's astronomical to me. And it, you know, it just shows the absolute need that's there. And it, as people have discussed, the ripple effect that happens when someone is displaced, that I feel like the cost would very much outweigh the cost that it would take to just get some simple counsel in there. So I'm hopeful that my other commissioners and I are able to work on any sort of proposals to help with that. But I think one of the things that was both sort of we kind of knew lurking and was kind of a disappointment to see it flushed out in the numbers was the racial disparity. That it is a bigger indicator of the racial makeup than of the socioeconomic background there. You know, I thought we'd gotten beyond the concept of redlining. You know, I don't want to see neo redlining come back in the form of evictions. I don't want to see us being able to more easily predict the outcome of a judicial case based on race than based on income when it should be financially related. And I think that if anything, shows that we have a long way to go if we're trying to achieve actual justice in the system there. Um, you know, it's really it's unacceptable in this day and age that your racial background should be a bigger indicator of your success in something than anything else. And I want to thank the Lehigh Valley Justice Institute for the very sobering realization that is quantifiable uh, through statistics here. And I think it gives us a real good push to try to address some of these underlying systemic issues.
Yes, and
So I want to thank you guys for that.
yeah, if I might just address that really briefly, Commissioner Harrington. I think it's important that we recognize that everybody has biases. Everybody in this meeting tonight has biases. They're basically a fact of life. The point is that through bias awareness programs, you can take those biases and you can bring them into the conscious mind. And so then you can deal with them. And before you make a decision, you can say, oh, well, you know, am I looking at this completely neutrally, or do I have a bias here? And it just, I think that's ultimately the way that we deal with it. But everybody's got biases, and everybody will have biases. The question is becoming aware of them and dealing with them in a conscious way.
No, thank you. Yeah.